To ken or not to ken? I've been asking myself this recently. Ever since seeing the Barbie movie, I've been thinking about femininity, Will Ferrell's stale performance as an actor, and man's historical relationship with horses. As a man, what does it mean to ken? And am I a Ken or an Alan? And what's the difference? Unfortunately, kenning is not a gerund or present participle of the verb to ken. As much as I want to ken and talk about what that means, this isn't a video about Ken or Barbie. It's actually about Barbieland. Specifically the word Barbieland. Is it a kenning? Simply, kennings are a robust linguistic device that is used to enrich description of a noun. And more simply, kennings are a two-word phrase used in place of a one-word noun. Two common kennings that might be heard in everyday life is bookworm for a reader or ankle biter for a toddler. You might notice a pattern, and there's three elements comprising the formula. Linguistically speaking, the two-word phrase is made up of a determinant and a base word, and the one-word noun is a referent. To spell this formula out, the determinant adds some spice and sugar to the base word to create a kenning that is synonymous to its referent. So, is Barbieland a kenning? My knee-jerk reaction is to say yes. Barbie and land come together in this seemingly two-word phrase to describe a noun. The problem is there is no noun for Barbieland to replace. The writers created this world for the movie. Barbieland is new. And with that being said, we've answered our question. Is Barbieland a kenning? No, it's just a word. It'd be more accurate to say that something like human land is a kenning for Earth. But are kennings really synonymous? And deeper, should they be synonymous? For this, let's dial back the timeline a bit. We'll return to human land, or Earth, depending on your politics, in a little bit. For now, let me take you to Alex Land. Kennings are first seen in Old English and Old Norse poetry. Beowulf is a great example of an Old English poem that contains kennings. It's an epic poem written around 1,000 years ago to describe the journey of Beowulf, a man who slays a monster to become king, and then prosperously rules, and then dies defeating a second monster later in his life. All in all, a simple conflict compared to contemporary works, but seminal in the field of storytelling and myth-making. The poem has roots in pagan and Norse culture, which is why kennings are not out of place in this text. Kennings originated and are still prevalent in Norse languages. Icelandic and German are filled with examples of simple and complex kennings. The German word for umbrella, Regenschirm, directly translates to rain screen. And a slang word for motorcycle in English might be pocket rocket, but in German you might hear someone say Feuerstuhl, which means fire chair. Funny how things work out like that. My first formal introduction to kennings was when I read Beowulf. One of the earlier stanzas in the poem uses the word whale road. Here, whale road is a fantastic replacement for ocean. It brings up this image of whales traveling through vast, invisible networks that were seemingly created solely for them. And they do that. Whales travel thousands of kilometers into the unknown of the ocean, all the while knowing where they're going. They don't have Google Maps, and yet they migrate all across the world. On the subject of whales and kennings, there's even an argument to be made that blowhole is a kenning for nostril, or spiracle, depending on how pretentious you're feeling that day, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's hump back a bit. I don't want to blow anyone away with my whale theories. The point I was trying to make is that whale road and ocean are symbolically similar but semiotically different, and as an aside, talking about symbols and semiotics is scary business, so I'm not going to pull that thread any further. It leads us to a very long, very dark hole that will be explored another time. For now, I'd like us to talk about our feelings, and in doing so, we'll come to understand why kennings are due for a comeback. pretty language makes us feel better. And that's how I feel. I finished Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders recently. Just let me stop you for 1 second. I personally hate spoilers of any kind and in any capacity at all. Any little capacity or huge capacity. I don't know. So if you don't want to hear me talk about Lincoln in the Bardo, skip to this time. And it's one of the few books I've read that I've noticed Kennings as a motif, precisely because they were so masterfully crafted and placed. They just added so much texture and richness to the writing that engulfed me. For those who haven't read the book, I'd say it's a story that explores life, death, and grief during the death of Abraham Lincoln's son, Willie Lincoln, about 1 year after the American Civil War began. Many characters are ghosts who are trapped in the Bardo, meaning in limbo or in purgatory, whatever between life and death means to you, really. Throughout the novel, the Kennings sick box is used to refer to coffin. The ghosts rest in their sick boxes because, to themselves, they're not dead. If they were, they'd be in coffins, but they have social lives with other ghosts, and they can think, and they can talk, and move around, so to them, they're not dead. They're just sick. That's just one example of the Kennings that Saunders uses throughout the book. But in chapter 86, I got chills because of a stupid little Kenning. The chapter opens with descriptions of the boy's declining health. He's said to have developed typhoid, and that in his unconsciousness he tries to fight the disease by fighting and thrashing and these frenzied movements. But at one point he stops moving, and he's still. Those gathered at his bedside in his room believed this to mean he was on his own now. And it's at this point that Saunders writes, "The death dew gathered on his brow." I could spend 1,000 years writing 1,000 Beowulfs and never come up with such a beautiful word that means sweat, all the while meaning so much more than sweat. The power of Kennings lies in its ability to concisely imbue additional meaning into our language. Everyone calls the ocean without batting an eye, but if you were to call it Whale Road, it evokes a different mental image and a new perspective in the listener. Certainly, common, well-understood language has its purpose, but there's artistic and meaningful value in using flowery language. Flowers exist for a reason. Don't let that reason go to waste. Go forth unto human land and disseminate your own beauty sounds.